Hello, geography students. I will spare you the English accent today. However, I have to say it one time. Mary Poppins. That's about all I got. So, today we are going to start our discussion about Europe. I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. However, I am fascinated by Europe and consider myself part European. I think most of us have some European blood in us, and I'm sort of a mutt. I have a little bit of everything in me. So that's where we're going today. We're going to stay in Europe probably for a couple of weeks. We have 4 weeks left, and so I really want to get to South America just briefly, even if it's just for a day. There's some pretty fun things related to South America. If we were in school, I would try to go to North America, and I was going to have you guys do a project on North America or the United States national parks, and I'm so bummed that we can't do that, but we're going to press on and continue. Our next unit will be on the countries of Europe, and what I'm going to do is Europe is broken into 4 different regions, and I'm going to pick a few countries from each region depending on how much time I have. And so today we are going to start with Northern Europe. I do have Captain America here off in the screen here, and I also have my European items set up for discussion as well. My teacup right here, sitting right there, right there. I mentioned this in my video on Tuesday, that this was a tea set of my husband's, actually it was a whole china set of my husband's great grandmother. It was actually their wedding china, and I'm trying to think what year they got married. They got married like in probably 1935 or 1940, something like that. So the china is really old, and it's beautiful, and it's frail, it's fragile, and we don't, like I said, we don't use it very much. But it is a reminder of her and how expensive it was at the time to have that china sent over from Europe. So it's French china. Okay, all right, I'm going to dive into a lesson, and I'm going to walk through the PowerPoint with you. There are a number of video links that I want you to watch as well. When you see them queued up on the video or in the PowerPoint, that's when you'll want to watch them. Also, I have included in the PowerPoint, as well as in my message to you, a copy of the Europe map. And so I didn't count the countries, but it's pretty close to the countries in Africa. You've already memorized a number of them. There's a few in Eastern Europe and the Baltic states that are pretty tough. And so we're going to try to memorize them. Since we aren't going to have a final, you guys are not going to be required to complete all of the maps of the entire world. I felt like that was just too much considering everything going on. So we are definitely going to focus on each continent. On Tuesday, you took the Africa map test, and so with this unit, you're going to actually be tested over the map of Europe. So there is a map there for your viewing pleasure. Something else that I'm going to have you guys do during this unit that I've had the last few years, had the kids do the last few years, is I want you to pick a country from Europe, and I want you to create a travel brochure for that country. The list of all of the European countries is in the PowerPoint. I don't care if we have duplicates. Usually in the past, I have tried to get everybody to do a different one, but I'm not going to worry about it at this juncture. I'm going to send you basically a sample brochure, and you can use that doc if you want to create your own. But you're going to be looking at things like, what does it cost to stay in a hotel in this country? What are my other options? Airbnb. What does transportation cost? Do they have public transportation? How much would an Uber cost? What are the most important tourist destinations of the city? What do you have to see when you're there? What's the population of the country? That sort of stuff. What are the most famous museums in that country? And so anyway, let me know if you have any questions. I haven't decided when I'm going to have that due, but it'll probably be down the road a couple weeks or so. I don't want you to get too worked up about it. It really is simple. If you wait till the very last minute to do it, sometimes getting it to work in the format is a little frustrating, but hopefully you'll have plenty of time to do it, and I always really enjoy that particular project. So You'll see the countries. All I want you to do is just message me and let me know which country that you want to do, and I will put your name on the list. Okay, I gotta put my glasses on. Alrighty. All right, so the next 4 PowerPoints show the various regions of Europe. So we have Northern Europe, which is going to include countries such as Iceland, Ireland, the United Kingdom, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. That might be it, yeah. And then Southern Europe, which is going to be Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, West Central Europe, which is kind of the heart of the 2 world wars, France and Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, and then lastly, Eastern Europe. Probably of those 4 regions, the associations that we of Americans have are least in common with Eastern European, unless you happen to have a Russian or some sort of Slavic in your family line. Most settlers that came to America early on were from those western parts of Europe. At the turn of the century, about 1900, more Eastern Europeans and Russians began to come into the country. Russia was going through a significant upheaval. Ultimately, in 1917, the communists overthrew their government. So a lot of those Eastern European countries have been unstable, and they began to come to America looking for a better home. So today's fact of the day, one of my favorites, is the Vikings. So in your Google Doc that's attached to this lesson, you're going to list 6 facts, and I'm going to give you a whole bunch of facts. I will say right up front, one of my favorite Viking films or cartoons is How to Train Your Dragon, or How to Train a Dragon. I looked to see if it was free, available anywhere, because I'd love to make that an assignment, because there are so many fun overlaps with what we talk about, but I couldn't find it. So a lot of you have probably seen it. I found some video clips that there's one in particular that I wanted to show you. I'll see if I can come up with that. But in your Google Docs, you're going to list 6 facts related to the Vikings. And I am going to, so in the PowerPoint, it basically, it kind of shows you where the Vikings were generally from. Most people think they were from the Scandinavian countries, up there, Norway, Sweden, mostly Norway and Sweden, and they essentially harassed the rest of Europe, and that was their home base. And there are a couple of maps there that show you the extent of their travels, exploration, generally their pillaging, generally their travels outside of their home countries were stealing, scaring, taking back things to their country. It wasn't so much dominating and empire building as it was stealing. And they had quite a reputation. They were considered uncivilized by those Christianized Europeans that were terrified of them, thought they were pagans. The next PowerPoint slide has a picture of the various images that we have been confronted with or exposed to in our Western culture. Everything from How to Train a Dragon to VeggieTales, Lyle the Kindly Viking. There actually is a series, I think it's might be on HBO. It's called Vikings, and I tried to find a couple of clips to show, but man, it's seriously violent. Brave, I think, also has reference to Vikings. Of course, the Viking football team. And there's some other images here, but most often they are associated with their Viking ships. Just the kind of, I'm going to say dirty as far as unkept, unclean. They are not very sanitary. They always generally they look like they've been in a dogfight, long hair, bloody. One of the images that you'll see here, and oftentimes they would wear these crazy hats, probably just to scare people. And their swords, in this particular Viking, he's beheaded somebody and he's holding a head. It's just an artist depiction. The people were terrified of them. I'm going to jump into my Google Doc and I'm going to read some of the specific information that I have. And again, you can write down anything that I share. So the age of the Vikings, I'm going to scoot Captain America over for just a second. Sorry, y'all. Okay. The age of the Vikings lasted from 793 AD, so 793 years after the birth of Christ, to 1066 AD. During this time, a vast number of Scandinavians left their homelands to seek their fortunes elsewhere. These seafaring warriors, collectively known as the Vikings or Norsemen, which means Northmen, began by raiding coastal sites, especially undefended Catholic monasteries, which is where they sort of get the uncivilized title, in the British Isles. Over the next 3 centuries, they would leave their mark as pirates, as raiders, traders, and settlers on much of Britain and the European continent, as well as even parts of modern-day Russia, Iceland, Greenland, and Newfoundland. Contrary to some popular conceptions of the Vikings, they were not a race, so to speak, linked by ties of common ancestry or patriotism, and they could not be defined by any particular sense of Vikingness. Most of the Vikings whose activities are best known come from the areas known as Denmark, I forgot about Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. So Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Though there are mentions of historical records of Finnish, Estonian, and Sami Vikings as well. Their common ground and what made them different from the European peoples, again, was that they were from a foreign land and they were considered uncivilized because most people were Christian. The exact reason for Vikings venturing out from their homeland are uncertain, but have suggested it was due to overpopulation of their homeland, but the earliest Vikings were looking for gold, riches, not land. Okay, so the very first attack of Vikings took place off the coast of northeastern England. In AD 793, an attack on the Lindisfarne Monastery, again a Catholic monastery, off the coast of northeastern England marked the beginning of the Viking Age. The culprits, probably from Norway, who sailed directly across the North Sea, did not destroy the monastery completely, but the attack shook the European religious world to its core. Unlike other groups, these strange new invaders had no respect for religious institutions. They didn't care it was a monastery. Monasteries oftentimes were left unguarded, and they were very vulnerable when they were near the ocean. 2 years later, Viking raids struck the undefended island monastery in France. Off the northeast coast of Ireland. The first recorded raid in continental Europe came in 799 in France, so they went as far down as France. By the mid-9th century, Ireland, Scotland, and England had become major targets for Viking settlements as well as raids. Vikings controlled the northern Isles of Scotland, I don't know how to say that one, and the mainland Scotland. They founded Ireland's first trading towns, which we know today as Waterford, which is a place where China is made, Wexford, Wicklow, and Limerick, and used their base on the Irish coast to launch attacks within Ireland and across the Irish Sea to England. Meanwhile, Viking armies remained active on the European continent throughout the 9th century, brutally sacking several French cities, attacking towns as far inland as even Paris, Orleans, Tours. In 844, Vikings stormed Seville, which is in Spain, which was then controlled by the Arabs. They even plundered Pisa, Italy. An Arab fleet battered them on their way back north. It says in the 9th century, Scandinavians, mainly Norwegians, began to colonize Iceland. And so Iceland has a pretty significant history with the Vikings, where no one had yet settled in large numbers. By the late 10th century, some Vikings, including the famous Eric the Red, moved even further westward to Greenland. According to later Icelandic histories, some of the early Viking settlers in Greenland, supposedly led by Norwegian Viking hero Leif Erikson, who was son of Eric the Red, may have become the first Europeans to discover and explore North America. There was never any long permanent settlement in North America, however. The events of 1066 in England effectively marked the end of the Viking Age, and by that time all of the Scandinavian kingdoms had become Christian, and what remained of Viking culture was being absorbed into the culture of a Christian Europe. So essentially Christianity killed the Vikings, and they were no more. I have a whole lot more, just generally lots of archaeological finds of Viking ships. They have been preserved because of the cold nature of the climates in which they were built. The most typical Viking ship is called a long ship. It was intended for warfare and exploration. I've got some pictures of those in here. The long ship had a long, narrow hull and shallow draught to facilitate landings and troop deployments in shallow water. let's see here. Longships allowed the Norsemen to go Viking, which might explain why this type of ship has become synonymous with the concept of Viking. All right, so I'm sure you got plenty of things out of that. There are some images of some of those ships. If you were to go to Norway, let's see, Oslo and Osberg, they have some museums that actually have complete Viking ships. And some of the carvings of the dragons that are oftentimes associated with their ships are incredibly intricate and very well preserved. So enjoy those images. There's also an image of a reconstructed Viking house, what it might have looked like in Denmark. There's a reconstructed Viking house in Iceland. It's pretty much underground. They've used the grass of the area as a covering. Some Viking swords that have been recovered. Architecture or archaeologists have found them. Most of them have some significant handle at the top. Well, you'll see it. It kind of looks like mushrooms. There's also an artist depiction of the Viking longships coming into Paris in 845 AD. I would imagine that was a terrifying experience. Maybe not quite as terrifying as Adolf Hitler waking up the morning paper in 1939 and seeing Adolf Hitler and his cronies standing underneath the Eiffel Tower. How terrifying would that be? You'll see a film strip there. I do want you to watch, I think there's 2 clips that go together of a VeggieTale, Lyle the Kindly Viking. I don't know if you guys actually saw that one, how old you were when that was released. It was released kind of right at the end of Chapman's VeggieTale era, so he knew that one. And it actually, Lyle the Kindly Viking takes the stuff that is stolen from the priest in the monastery and he wants to give it back to them, or he makes them mittens and stuff. So it kind of tells the story of how the Vikings would attack the monasteries, which when I watched it the first time, I did not really realize that there was some truth in that when I was watching it a couple decades ago or so. So anyway, enjoy those 2 little clips. All right, and as I said before, I've mentioned this a couple of times. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. I gotta keep him in the screen because he makes me so happy. I think I told you guys this, but we're watching the Marvel series. Oh, I love his little shield. There we go. We're watching the Marvel series when we have time, when I'm not recording videos for you guys. And we just finished, let's see, Winter Soldier. So it's Captain America, Winter Soldier. It's the second Captain America. It was so good. So anyway, I think we're going to watch, I can't remember the next couple. Cheney said they're comedies, which we'll see. So anyway, I'm enjoying that. If you haven't done that, it's pretty fun. All right, I mentioned this before. It's always a good idea to print out the text of the PowerPoints. Definitely don't print out all the pictures. You're gonna run your parents and your grandparents out of ink from their copy machine, or their printers. So, but I definitely would encourage you to print out the text and the definitions and the facts of the day, so that you can stay organized. But the next PowerPoint is just general information about Europe. So I'll tell you what I know, and there's all kinds of information. So I'm going to summarize it into some kind of nuts and bolts, important, just basic facts about Europe, and then we'll talk about the different countries and different parts of Europe. Europe covers approximately 7% of the Earth's land surface, so not huge. Although I would say that the culture of Europe, the Europeans, the German-speaking people, the Latin-speaking people, have changed the direction of human history for sure. Europe is made up of approximately 50 countries, which coincides with Africa's 54 countries. The population of Europe, if you were to take the population of all of the European countries combined, and that includes everything all the way from Russia all the way to Ireland or Portugal, 750 million people, 750 million people, less than China, less than India. The primary religion of Europe is loosely defined as Christianity. So for we Protestants, I don't think I have any Catholics in the audience, but for we Protestants, when we say, are you a Christian, we generally mean, do you subscribe to our particular theology? But when historians are looking at cultures and they say this culture is a Christian culture, that means that our religious preference believes in one God, who manifests himself in the person of Jesus Christ and in the Holy Spirit, and that Jesus came to earth and died for our sins. And then beyond that, historians would lump everybody together that has any belief in Jesus. So they would say Catholics fall under the Christian umbrella, Protestants fall under the Christian umbrella, and Protestants are those that were morphed out of Catholicism. So Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Assembly of God, E-Free, Bible churches, non-denominational, Churches of Christ, all of those would be considered Protestant. And then you have Catholic over here, which has Orthodox and non-Orthodox. But all of them have a belief, a professed belief in Jesus as the Son of God and the Savior of the world. Now, they all tend to have different interpretations of that. And I'm not going to, this isn't Bible class, so I'm not going to dive into a deep discussion of that. But I just want you to understand that when they say it's a Christian culture, the primary religion of Europe is Christian, that does not mean that everybody is a believer. But primarily they practice religions that believe in Jesus and believe that he is the Savior of the world in some capacity. So with all that said, most of Europe is divided between Catholic and Protestant. The history of the Catholic Church is embedded in the nation of Italy, in Rome in particular, and then the Protestants are embedded in the history of starting with the German Reformation, which then led to Reformation all around Europe. So there are three primary language groups, and this is tricky. Most of us English-speaking people think that the world all speaks English, and actually they kind of do. Since we are the largest, or have been the largest trading company, superpower, industrial and otherwise, countries have accommodated us because we are a consumer society and we buy their stuff. And so they want to make it easy for us. And so they use English as a buying and selling language. So, but the three main language groups of Europe can fall under three umbrellas. The Romantic languages, which came out of Latin. Latin was a language spoke by the Roman Empire. And those languages that developed out of Latin are Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian. And so all of those languages have their roots in Latin. And if you hear those languages spoken, you can hear the similarity in a lot of the different words that they use. You can almost hear the similarities. So Romantic is one. Whenever I hear the Romantic language, I think of that. I think it's Warner Brothers' Pepe Le Pew. He's a skunk. He's a French skunk. I think he's French. And he's always talking about falling in love. And my name is Pepe Le Pew. And he represents that Romantic language. And all of those languages, generally, when you hear them speak, they're beautiful to listen to. They're easy to listen to. Whereas the Slavic languages and the Germanic languages have a little crunchier sound to them. All right, so Romantic language is the first one. Germanic language is the second one, and actually English is based upon the Germanic languages. The three languages that are Germanic are English, German, and Dutch, and so they all sound very similar. I was gonna say whenever I teach World War II and I get to, sometimes I play a couple of Adolf Hitler speeches so the kids can hear the intonation of his voice and his persuasiveness. And as you're listening to him speak in German, it's like, oh, I knew that word. Oh, it's amazing how many of those German words I recognize because my language, English, comes out of that language. And then lastly, the Slavic languages. So those are Russian, Ukrainian, Polish, and then there's a few others. They're very hard. If you've ever heard a Russian person speak, it's almost like they spit a lot. Sorry if there's any Russian speaking people there. It is not a beautiful language, in my humble opinion. It's masculine. It's not smooth and lovely. I think English is kind of in between. The one thing that we have as Germanic speaking language people, ours is English, is that the English language in particular has for every 2 or 3 words in the Latin languages, there are 5 English words. And so we are able to express ourselves. Our written language has many more adjectives and ways to express ourselves. And so, like for instance, if we study the history of the ideas of liberty, one of the reasons the ideas of liberty have been so successful within English-speaking nations all around the world, whether they're the United Kingdom or the United States, we have been able to express the ideas of liberty in ways that some of those other languages have had a difficult time expressing. So that's another lecture for another time. So Romantic, Germanic, and Slavic. All right, the definition, first set of countries we're going to visit are Northern European countries, and those include Iceland, Ireland, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Those are considered Northern European. The United Kingdom is made up of actually 4 individual countries. You have Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and England, and so that makes up the United Kingdom. Let's see here. The British Isles, I just mentioned that, but this is the definition in the PowerPoint. The British Isles are a group of islands northwest of and separated from the rest of Europe. They are made up of 2 main islands of Ireland to the southwest and Great Britain, which is England, Scotland, and Wales. And there's about 6,000 other little tiny islands that surround the British Isles. The next definition is fjord, F-J-O-R-D. I don't know if I have the video in this one or not, but fjords are little inlets that have been carved into the Scandinavian countries by glaciers that have moved off of the land and into the water, and they've carved out these beautiful inlets. One of the coolest travel destinations by boat are some of the fjords in Norway in particular. A boat cruise through the fjords is phenomenally beautiful, and I've got some pictures of here on here. When we get to Norway, we're going to look at some of those videos. They're unbelievable. It's on my bucket list. The pictures that are seen here of this just crystal blue water from the cold frozen glaciers that have moved across land are just, they're stunning. There's one here actually of a cruise boat, cruise ship coming up one of the fjords, one of the lakes carved out by the fjords. Probably won't be doing any cruise ships anytime soon on fjords, but then there's another one, another cruise ship. Okay, the next definition is North Atlantic Drift. There's a map here that shows it, but the North Atlantic Drift is an ocean current that brings warm, moist air up from the southern Atlantic and moves it up past the British Isles and Ireland. This current keeps most of Northern Europe warmer than other locations that are up there in that high latitude. I mean, parts of it are in the Arctic Circle, but because the British Isles are nestled up against this current, it prevents them from experiencing some of the frigid temperatures that other countries that far north experience. Let's see here. Okay, next I have a picture of How to Train a Dragon, and if I were in class with you right now, I would actually show you a couple of scenes from this movie, but I can't. But if you have access to it, I strongly encourage you to watch the movie. It's a great movie. I'm going to probably upload a couple of short little video clips that I was able to find on YouTube, and you can watch them at this point. All right. Scandinavia. The next definition, again, I'm just zipping through this pretty quickly. The countries that make up Scandinavia, you've probably heard that expression before, Scandinavia. Scandinavia is a region of Northern Europe, which includes Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Sometimes it also includes Iceland and Finland. They have shared history, shared culture, history with the Vikings as well. If you live in one of those countries way up north near the Arctic Circle, and actually you can even see them sometimes from the British Isles, the Northern Lights. Now, there's a video associated with this as well, but the Northern Lights are also called the Aurora Borealis. You probably learned about this in science in junior high. But they are lights and images that are created in the night sky that have to do with molecules and dust clashing with gravity. I'm going to read the definition. So The aurora borealis, sometimes called the northern lights, are lights or images created in the atmosphere near the north and south poles. It's caused by collisions between air molecules and charged particles from the sun that are trapped in the Earth's magnetic field. I have a really cool, short, interesting video about how this happens. I've never seen it before. It's totally on my bucket list. Would love to know if any of your family or your friends have ever seen this. Again, and when you travel to these places during seasons that you should be able to see it, there is no guarantee that you will. So I've had friends that have taken like Alaskan cruises hoping to see them. You just don't know for sure if you'll see them. So I have some incredible, beautiful images that were taken. Most of these in Scandinavia. One of them is in northern Canada. There's one in Norway, one in Iceland, Iceland again, Ireland even, one in northwestern corner of Ireland. So take a look at those, watch the video associated with it. It's phenomenally beautiful. All right. Okay, the first country that we're going to visit is Iceland. Iceland, I keep saying this, is on my bucket list as well. Chapman and my husband were supposed to go to Iceland couple summers ago, and they ended up doing something else. Chapman, I think, ended up going back to Spain. But Iceland, probably one of their biggest markets right now is the tourism industry. They have really spent a lot of advertising and time focusing their energy on drawing people to come to Iceland. There was a direct flight from, I'm guessing, New York to Iceland that was fairly cheap. You could get one for $500 or $600, which is, again, pretty cheap for heading over to Europe. And of course they have a 24-hour cycle of light, 24, and then the midnight sun, where they have periods of all light, periods of all dark, or sort of dark. And so you have to hit it right. But if you hit it when there's all sunlight, you literally can tour the country around the clock. You can camp in your cars, you can rent a car. It's fairly cheap to go there, to travel through there as well. So let me put my glasses back on here. I'm going to run through just the information about Iceland. So it's considered, again, generally part of Scandinavia. It was first colonized in 870 AD by Norwegian settlers, probably associated with the Vikings. It became the Republic of Iceland in 1944 at the end of World War II. Iceland was used, if I recall, by the Allies during World War II as a station to basically serve as a, what's the word I'm looking for? Way station for our ships, for troops to refuel, to refresh, and to keep guard against the German subs and that sort of thing. So they became the Republic of Iceland in 1944. There's about 500,000 people that live in Iceland. It's the least populated country in Europe. The capital city is Reykjavik. And if you travel to Iceland, one of the things you'll discover is the irony between the cold, cool temperatures and mild temperatures in the summer and all of the geothermal activity. It is full of all kinds of volcanic and geothermal activity. They actually have a language. It's called Icelandic. It is a Germanic language. Probably sounds a lot like German. They are Lutheran they're Protestant, but the particular denomination that most Icelanders practice is Lutheran, and that's because during the Protestant Reformation, in the years afterwards, they sent missionaries to places that the Catholic Church did not have a stranglehold on, and Iceland happened to be one of those countries. A lot of the Scandinavian countries have a significant Lutheran population. So Lutherans prescribe to Martin Luther's way of doing church. So Martin Luther, as you know, was a monk, Catholic monk, wrote against the teachings, the doctrines of the Catholic Church at the time, and was excommunicated. Probably would have died, but he was protected by a German prince. And but he held on to some of the teachings of the Catholic Church. Like, for instance, he continued to believe in the sacrament of baptizing infants. He also continued to believe in I believe he followed the practice of the belief that in communion, the bread and the wine become the body and blood, like actually of Jesus. Catholics believe that as well. It's called transubstantiation. And most Protestant denominations resisted that because it was too close to what the Catholics believed. And I'm sure your church probably does not believe in transubstantiation. They believe that the bread and the cup represent figuratively the body and blood of Christ, not actually physically. Let's see here, what else? And then of course soccer is a huge deal in Iceland as it is in the rest of Europe. And in the last, I think it was the last World Cup, I believe it was, Iceland had a phenomenal soccer team, and they made it a lot farther than everybody thought that they would. It might have been 2 World Cups ago. Anyway, I'm going to show you a video link that I want you to watch that shows the Icelandic soccer team returning after a lot of success at the World Cup. And for such a small country, that's what was so impressive about their soccer skills, is that even though they have a small population, they killed it. And so one of their chants is a Viking chant, and the whole community in the capital city comes together to cheer them on, and they do this chant. And I want you guys to watch that. So you'll see the cue in the PowerPoint to watch that. Let's see here. Lots of beautiful, incredible blue, crystal blue images of Iceland. I also have a picture of the soccer team there. I wanted you to kind of get an idea of what the people look like. They look like beautiful, blonde, Viking-ish type, Scandinavian type people. They're beautiful people. I have a picture of Miss Iceland. What year is that? 2016. Just your traditional blonde hair, blue eyes, beautiful girl. And then the very last thing that I have in the PowerPoint is a list of the countries again, the European countries. And I want you guys to go through that list, and I want you to choose your country, and I want you to either email me so I can scribble it in there, or you can message me through Google Classroom and say, Mrs. Campbell, this is the country that I want. And so more details about that coming later. So watch the PowerPoint, listen to me blab. Watch all of the video links as you see them prompted in the PowerPoint. Make a copy of the PowerPoint notes so that you have something to keep track of. And I think that's it. I'm going to grab and have some more tea and talk about Mary Poppins. And Captain America and I are going to attempt to discover the true origins of Doctor Strange. Is he British or is he not? That's all I have for y'all. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Love you guys. Bye.